Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Decloak podcast. And today's special guest is Samarah Kazmi, who is the Chief Innovation Officer at Resurge. Also, quite a repertoire in terms of career. Samrah is also a Fintech founder, an award winner, keynote speaker, and also held CISO positions and academic teaching positions in her career. So, Samrah, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm really excited for today's conversation. Hopefully your audience is going to enjoy our back and forth today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just for our audience, we obviously met at a panel in New York. You were a panel member, very astute panel member, may I add, and also I was chairing that session, and we obviously got to know each other along with our fellow panel members. And it was a great event that we had talking about a multitude of different technology and cyber items. And we'll jump straight in then, Samrah, in terms of a brief overview of you and your career. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a very diverse background, unlike most people in cybersecurity. And I wouldn't say like I'm a true cyber person or purely a cyber person. I started off, so I have about 30 years of experience on Wall Street. So I started off right in the front office as an equity derivatives trader. I did that for about 10 years, and then I actually moved into credit structuring, which is, around the time of the mortgage, the subprime boom that was happening here in the United States and pretty much across the world. So I structured many of the mortgage-backed securities, etc., the derivatives of those credit default swaps as well. And after, at the time of the crisis, while I was doing that, the market was kind of teetering. And then eventually at the collapse of the mortgage market, at the collapse of structured finance, and the whole triggering effect of that collapse, which was the recession, the credit crisis, and the recession of 2008. The bank that I was working at, where I was structuring these securities, basically laid off everyone in like almost 1,000 people who were connected to mortgages, who were connected to structured finance, etc. And basically, I was the only person remaining. Like the only person that they retained, and immediately my remit went from risk taking to risk management. And there is something I had never done, being a trader before, and then actually being a credit structurer. That was never, that was never part of my mindset. So what actually happened is I basically had to learn on the job. And it wasn't a very luxurious environment where I had tons of time or to actually go take courses, etc. So I had to pretty much, work with our risk department at the bank, and as well as all of my risk colleagues to understand how to take my career to the next level, but not just take the career, pretty much survive in that role at the time, because at that time there were layoffs happening across the industry, and my prospects outside the bank weren't that great. So I had to make sure I survived in the bank. But the most challenging part was, it was not just every day was a fire drill, because you had negative news happening globally. But because of the systemic nature of the crisis, it always touched the institution I worked in some way, shape, or form, or it just created this crisis mentality. So my position, from just being someone who was working in a team, just creating sort of revenue generating strategies, now became someone who has to constantly report to the board, report to the CEO. And this was a global bank. I was working in their US offices, but it was one of the larger banks in Europe. So I had to also deal with European regulators, US regulators, and multiple jurisdictions. At the time, I felt like that was the worst thing that could have happened to me, because it was I was always under the microscope. I always had to have answers to undefined questions. I always had to sort of make sure that I was allaying everybody's fears, and yet even I didn't have those answers. So it was a very uncertain environment. So almost, I'm going to say, it took 3 years for that whole mess to go away. And after after the market turned, the recession was over. I was laid off from there. So
Yeah.
it pretty much, I went through the crisis with the bank, and eventually my job was eliminated, because I was no longer the assets that I had to manage the risk on had been unwound, and so on and so forth. So I decided to actually completely quit the financial services industry at that point. And I joined a utility company, which is one of the largest utilities here on the East Coast. And they found me to be very attractive, because I had the structured finance background, and what they were doing were repackaging solar loans and renewable energy assets. And I went back to that whole risk-taking environment, and it was pretty much running a bank within a utility. So like literally a green bank within a utility. Again, but there was not there was more focus on the risk management aspect, just because it was also a federally and state funded program, and it wasn't Wall Street of the 80s, 90s, 2000s. It was really just a very small carved out part of an energy or utility company. So I did that for about 2 years, and then as I saw things picking up in financial services, I felt the need to explore opportunities back there. And also I got a lot of inbound inquiries. So there was a subsidiary of the New York Stock Exchange called New York Portfolio Clearing. So that it was a startup that New York Stock Exchange had started, and they were looking for risk people. And somehow I got bucketed in as a risk person. I went in there, and I really built out their regulatory risk and the pretty much their risk program. And within months, New York Stock Exchange announced that they were now going to be merging with Intercontinental Exchange, which was I felt like it was almost catastrophic, because once again, I'm going to lose my job, because the New York Stock Exchange didn't really want to retain this entity. But what happened, but the good part was that, again, I had a vantage point from both the regulatory side as well as that of, sort of, again, a utility, because what they were offering were kind of utilitarian services. So I decided at that point that I would lean into GRC, governance, risk, and compliance discipline, because that's where I saw a lot of demand post-crisis. And now, because during the crisis, there was the Dodd-Frank Act for bank stress testing, and many other rules that were being written. So I had done that while at the bank that I was working at during the crisis, but now I felt like there was a lot of demand for senior level experienced risk people. And I was also, without much effort, I got multiple offers from various financial institutions in high-powered risk roles. So I decided to join General Electric's financial services arm, GE Capital, and that's where I ran their credit methodology, or basically credit risk modeling group for the Americas. And that was, I was there for about 6 months, and then GE announced its own transformation. And at that point, again, it was kind of like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job again. But I still took a risk because they basically said, stay till the end, till we unwind all the assets. They made it worthwhile for a select group of people. So it was an elite risk team. And I was part of the people who left right at the end. And again, that was a very transformative and a great learning experience for me. But at that point, I realized that I was kind of going through the cycle post-crisis where it was like every 2 years things were changing, or there was all this like massive upheaval happening in financial services. And I needed to look at the bigger picture. And what I saw is this like confluence of technology and financial services. And that's where I decided to like move into fintech. So long story short, I joined a fintech that didn't work out. I was laid off like very soon thereafter with like 30% of their workforce. And then I joined a SaaS company, basically software company, a global software company. And I helped them with as a subject matter expert on financial and regulatory products. So my fintech career evolved into Regtech. So it was, product development, a lot of thought leadership. And at that point, so I did that for 2 years, and then I decided that I want to quit corporate and like start my own, advisory practice. It was right before the pandemic. I couldn't foresee that. So what I did is, I continued with my practice, which was really geared towards large banks and their digital transformation efforts, because that's where my network was. However, the banks told me that I would be able to serve them better if I worked with all the startups and the third party who they are integrating with. And that's how I got really more into like the startup ecosystem. And during this time, I used to constantly be offered roles as like co-founder of various startups. So it never really was a good fit till it was a good fit. And then I eventually joined forces with someone from the hedge fund industry who started an alternative data platform. It was still very successful, still exists, but I left after 2 years of, I was there as the co-founder and COO. And I left that to then work as a fractional for most for startups across the board. So cyber, and I have this skill or expertise in go-to-market, product market fit, especially when it comes to like when I was working at the tech software company. So that has been kind of what I've been doing for a while now, for almost like 2 years. And in that capacity, I have also served, and even prior to doing that, I've served as a CISO at several startups, small, medium companies, as well as chief risk officer, COO, CFO, so CXO as a CXO kind of thing. But really what has been, so if you see the big picture, it's kind of like there are many different moving parts, but there is this like thread now that I have kind of identified. It's this like risk and compliance thread that's come about. And what has also helped from my earlier days of risk taking is I really, I'm really good with legal documents and contracts, etc. And also, when it comes to like structuring deals. So I bring this whole repertoire to wherever I go. And that's why, one thing I am actually very much a very sort of, I can contribute a lot to a startup. However, at the same time, I also work very well with mid-size and larger enterprises. So since this AI boom, we've had a lot of AI. First of all, like I think I'd say like 21, end of 22, when the whole Chat GPT explosion happened. All of 2023 or 2022, 2023, it was all about educating boards and of all these large enterprises and the C-suite. And this year, it's all been how do we find these compelling use cases, and how do we monetize this, and how do we really look at revenue? How do we look at costs? And how do we even identify AI washing, which is basically putting the glaze of AI on a non-AI or like on an automation product. So that's and which is now also in the context of Regtech. It's also now in the context of cybersecurity. Yeah. So once again, like all of these things are sort of, there's a confluence of everything. And that's kind of what I've been doing recently. So at this point, I'm now advising two different, one very large organization, one mid-size, on their AI transformation efforts. As you know, and I'm going to talk more about financial services, even though at this point I'm industry agnostic, but financial services, or pretty much everyone's been working on, or the incumbents have been working on their digital transformation efforts for now almost 10 years, or at least a decade, but post-crisis. But what we have seen is they have really struggled. And it's, in fact, there is an example of a bank here in the United States that just went through its upgrading its ATMs. So, the tellers. And it's almost like they have gone backwards in time by 2 decades. The previous ATMs would send you email receipts. This new ATM cannot even give you, can only give you printed receipts. If you look at what the ATM is telling you in terms of your balance versus what the mobile apps are telling you versus what when you log into your portal on your computer, they're completely different. And this has been going on now for 6 months with this bank. The customers are frustrated, the employees are frustrated. And the reason why they went through this major overhaul from machines that worked perfectly was because the provider of those, the manufacturer of those the previous machines, filed for bankruptcy. So obviously there was no maintenance, and there was this security, among other things, there's obviously the security threat. So they had to go in and they had to replace these machines. But it was done in such a thoughtless manner. I'm not going to say thoughtless, but it was done in such a manner that it's taken them back. It's really ruined the customer experience, to the fact that a lot of customers are actually leaving the bank, and of course the employees who bear the brunt of it are not the people in the digital transformation department, but the actual branch people are really, really also frustrated, because they're the ones who deal with frustrated customers. So having put that there, having seen what the digital transformation journey has been for most of these organizations, I'm not saying that every journey has been disastrous, but it's not been smooth. And it's obviously it's ever evolving. And now to incorporate AI into, or sort of permeate AI into the organization, which means permeate it into your digital transformation journey, is also, another big challenge. Along with the challenge that it causes a lot of security risks, along with the challenge that there is this talent and skills gap out there, that you don't have the right people when it comes to you are not able to attract the right people or the best people when it comes to AI, because there's so much competition, there's limited supply, as well as the skills gap in cybersecurity. There's, depending on who you listen to, there are on average 1 million open jobs in cybersecurity, while the cybersecurity incidents continue to grow. Yeah. So you've got all these factors occurring, and obviously banks are trying to do, or all organizations at this point are trying to do more with less. Even if we take out the AI factor, now there's this whole emphasis on cost, emphasis on productivity, emphasis on revenue. So obviously they are trying to do more with less people, not the most updated tools, not the most not the most updated processes. So that's another point of friction between the organization, their employees, as well as their customers. So so that is something that I try to rationalize and try to come up with roadmaps on how to prioritize these different and competing priorities, competing initiatives, and make sure that you are preserving your reputation. You are actually developing tools and models that are not just compliant in the moment, as we're talking about this bank that updated its ATMs, because they do the job at a very bare minimum basis, which is help you do your transactions, but they're not the optimal machines, right? So the fact of the matter is, how do you really think of these transformations in a secure way, in a way that actually gives you a strategic advantage over your peers, because pretty much everybody is now on the same bandwagon, right? So that's one. So this is where the emphasis on cybersecurity comes from my side, and which is a little bit different from some of the other consultants or some of the other experts who are really all about productivity, but less focused on the governance. So I really try to put that, have that balance there, just because I think that is really the most important part here, is to enable the customer, but also do it in a way that protects the institution's reputation, is secure for the customer in terms of everything, their own data and their own transactions. So so that's kind of, in a nutshell, where my background is and where it has led me to. And I feel like all the different experiences that I've had along the journey have really helped me help my constituents that way.
Hi everyone, I wanted to take a couple of minutes and talk about today's sponsor, which is Vanta. Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Through my experiences of using Vanta, Vanta automates compliance. It covers everything from SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and many more, saving you time and money, while helping you build customer trust. I love all the insights that it gives me, covering everything from asset management, my control failures, audit status, even vulnerabilities from other connecting systems which have been integrated into the platform. Having a centralized place for something like an ISO program has been a godsend for me. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. Why Vanta? With over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora, they all use Vanta to manage risk and provide security in real time. So, my listeners can claim a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/decloaked. That's vanta.com/decloaked. Thanks.
And it sounds like obviously pre-post crisis, multiple companies obviously not closing down, but roles becoming redundant, obsolete, or they're shifting the focus. And how did you build like a form of resilience for that? Because I'd imagine, obviously there's been a few occasions it sounds like you've been unlucky, and most people would probably, slip into some sort of degree of depression, or they would be questioning where they go in their career. I'm really interested, Samrah, in terms of how did you maintain an upbeat mindset? How did you keep positive? Is there any hints and tips you would offer people who may find themselves in a similar position? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say like it's not always a positive journey. So, for instance, after I left GE Capital, I was very determined to find a job in fintech. I had no fintech experience. I had no technology experience. So I was only financial services. So no technology experience, no fintech experience, and I was a very senior executive. So fintechs are not banks, so they don't pay you at the same level as a bank. A lot of it, especially if you go to a startup, the compensation component is in equity. So for me, I was determined to get that senior level job at a fintech at the compensation level that I desired. And weirdly enough, like in 6 weeks, I was able to make that happen and got multiple such offers. And I went with one of them was with my dream job with my dream company. And I was really ecstatic about it, only to find out. And the day they offered me the job, they also told me that, by the way, we want to be fully transparent. We just had we laid off some people today. So we want you to make an informed decision. And I think I was so, I don't know, like so determined, I decided that I would still take. And I asked them, like, does this mean like on a going forward basis, you're still at risk and my job is at risk? And they're like, no, we're like much more resilient at this point, and so on and so forth. And 6 weeks later, they had a 30% reduction in force, and I was one of them. And literally at that point, I was exhausted looking for a job. So I did not open my computer for about a week, and that was it. It was like, and then I was just going to the gym. I was just like walking in the park and all of that. And then and then finally, like one day, the day I decided to open my computer, I was like, I think I've been through the worst. Nothing can be like bad. I wasn't really depressed, but I was kind of like, I didn't want to, even that whole week that I took off, I just didn't want to think about what had happened. I wanted to focus on how I can take this and this, whatever you want to call it, this event, and turn it into an opportunity. And that's inherently been like, if you ask me, what are the challenges and opportunities, what are the challenges that an organization is facing right now in terms of AI or digital transformation, I will tell you that the challenges are also the opportunities, because that's the way I think. And I know there are other people think like that, but that's how I thought about it. And like within weeks, I got another offer without even like going out and looking for a job. That's what without looking for a job, I got an offer. And what I have over time realized that what I've been doing, and one of the things that I'm really very focused on is upskilling and watching trends, whether you look on LinkedIn or the news or Twitter, wherever, but looking at trends and looking at what's the next thing. Now, you can't, I mean, yes, I am very involved in AI. I advise governments, as well as large organizations, as well as smaller startups. But the thing is, I'm not a technologist. I don't know how to code, but I can do the strategic part of it. So I saw this shift happening, and actually there is there's a video from 2016 where that I did, which talks about everything that we're talking about today, everything that's happening in AI today, where the general purpose technology and so on and so forth. So I had seen that trend, and I worked towards that trend. So I worked towards building my technology literacy, and digital literacy. Even though like not the coding part of it, but as well as building my skills in GRC and cyber, because I knew that security, privacy is going to be a very big thing. So I did that. And today, and so my mindset shifted from looking for a high income or job to building high income skills. And that's actually what has like led me to this path where, regardless, you know, of where the economy is, where the job market is, I am, whether I am employed by an organization or I'm working on my own, I'm constantly attracting opportunities that are, you know, that are kind of on the cutting edge, or on the, you know, going to the next trend over. So that has been my mindset forever, or as long as I can remember. And that is what has kept me from just saying that this is such a drag, and, you know, things keep changing, and how much should I reinvent myself? Because if you are on this continued path of learning and upskilling, you are constantly evolving, and people see you as this, you know, sometimes as a unicorn, with very diverse skills, and that's what they want. Sometimes the opportunities I attract, I don't even know could have existed, but there are organizations that are creating new roles or creating new opportunities, and they see people like me on LinkedIn, and they think that, you know, it's worth a conversation. So that's how I see it. And one of the biggest components of my I'd say my mission really has become upskilling the C-suite and upskilling the board, because that is where a lot of the gaps are right now. In fact, that's all I did last year. It was like, I would go to boardrooms where people would say, explain to me AI, not Gen AI, but AI, like you would to a 5-year-old. You know, it was like that, and that was fine. And then we went to the next level and the next level, and now, you know, it's all about okay, how do we, you know, create value out of this? And, you know, how do we get the signal from the noise? How do we, you know, make sure that there's no AI washing? Where is the hype and where is not the hype? So it's all of those things that you know, I have used to create clarity in my own career, that I am now bringing to these organizations, especially to like senior leaders, because that's where most of I feel like, you know, most of the education needs to be. And of course, if the senior leadership and the board is comfortable with something, they will sponsor it across the organization. They will spend more money on it. So I think that that's an area of focus for me.
It's actually quite empowering to hear, and tying back to something earlier that you mentioned is obviously your background in trading. It's almost like you've developed this kind of, well, obviously an analytical insight. So obviously your brain is trained to look for patterns and trends. So obviously the pivot from all of the kind of craziness that's happened pre-post crisis, then moving into areas of emerging trends like GRC, then obviously that pivot into understanding the components of risk, innovation, and also the strategic overview of something like a major trend such as AI. And I think our listeners will absolutely love hearing, that dynamic of having control over your career, diversifying yourself, much to your points earlier, and being able to have that insight to look at, well, what's next? Because I think some people are shy to say that they want a top end position, they want a top end financial package to support that. But it's almost like, well, how do you do that? And again, back to your being diverse and hedging your bets on many different things, which you've done, and also understanding these trends to then articulate to executives. And back to your final point is that's where they sponsor it, and that's where they kind of ultimately support that and that execution of innovation or uptick on a specific technology trend. So that's yeah, it's good to hear that kind of logic and seeing that pattern unfold from because obviously you and I have spoken before, but understanding that kind of depth has been very, very insightful for me to hear that. And in terms of like the opportunities then, like within, like obviously AI has been the number one thing at the moment, the GRC side of it, where do you see GRC and AI intersect for the benefit of GRC? I'm interested to get your thought on that.
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing more and more Regtech solutions coming up. So, previously it was all about automation, and then predictive AI. And now you've got this sort of scenario generation aspect of it. So you can see these new tools emerging that can actually not just predict, but also not just do the prediction like it was like in fraud and AML, but also give you many more scenarios and increase the predictability. In fact, not only that, but decrease the time to discovery, decrease the time to recovery, which is like creating resilience. So I think that there is a very big, at this point, there is the opportunity for obviously SaaS tools, but when it comes to Regtech or risk tech, you can call it, or subtech, which is used for supervisors and regulators, those tools, just because with AI, things are going to get more and more complex. Business models are going to get more complex. Operating models are going to get more complex. The risk posture is going to get more complex. The threat actors who've always been, 2 steps ahead of us are now like 20 steps ahead of us. So. Yeah. So in the context of AI, there is, whether you talk predictive or generative, and then of course there's adversarial AI and so many other things that we can go into, but definitely there is an opportunity here for point solutions to actually address various issues. But also the other thing is to have like a future-proof unified platform, which can be very cohesive. And right now, the biggest challenge for many enterprises is the IT sprawl. You've got several different tools, SaaS tools, and proprietary tools and whatnot, but also with the advent of generative AI, you've got this shadow IT where, employees are downloading stuff from the internet and putting it on their network computers. And I know that people will say that's impossible because you need like admin passwords, but actually that's not impossible. That happens every day. So, the insider threat, whether it's malicious or unintentional, has also gone up. So these tools are definitely, so generative AI is going to give rise to these tools that are going to sort of mitigate these risks, but also there are going to be opportunities to actually implement future-proofed platforms that can that eliminate the sprawl, where all these solutions. So if you've got 5 different companies with 5 different solutions, one is looking at your email and the other is looking at identity and the other is looking at the network, when a breach happens in one of these areas, it can be it appears as a low-level breach, okay, at one of the vendors. So if a low-level breach happens simultaneously at all 3 points, it can be a higher level breach. But because all these disparate vendors are only seeing one part of it, it's not really elevated to the level that it should be. But if this was a cohesive platform, all the telemetry and everything was shared, then you would be able to immediately identify this is a high-level threat, and we've got to address it immediately. So it's things like that. I mean, I could go into multiple examples, but there is a huge opportunity. I've always thought, like the adversaries, the threat actors have always had the upper hand. But I feel like with these new tools, with the incorporation of AI into SaaS tools for these purposes, is going to maybe flip that switch, and we might have more control, and we're not always on the defensive as the targets, but so I'd say that is the opportunity, definitely.
I love that. It's something that resonates with me, and as a current CISO, is consolidation of information. And you're right, there could be 3 different types of attack happening, but each of those tools only see what's going on in their own realm. So I think the power of AI to be able to consolidate those positions, or maybe act as a middle person between all of those entities, but also in the GRC space, I think given where the world is in terms of whether it's a war, economic crisis, a presidential election, or whatever it may be, or the next pandemic, I think with the influence of AI within GRC, to be able to model to like 100% probability or 100% certainty, I think that definitely would really help a lot of institutions, whether it's investment or just a risk team in a company that has to deal with these responsibilities, and be able to articulate to their business strategy leaders or even their employees to say, within the next 6 months, we need to be prepared for X event, a black swan event or whatever, because of this information. And I think that could be something that, I don't know, maybe someone benefits from that idea and becomes a billionaire at the end of it, or you and I, Samrah, decide to build a company on the side. But I think that's definitely, I see where the benefit, the future state of that going. And, I'm interested from maybe the security leaders that you deal with in the companies, how should CISOs think about the future state of all of this?
Yeah, I have to say, unfortunately, today, cybersecurity is viewed as a cost center, which is unfortunate because the risks to consumers, the risk to the organization from a reputational perspective is huge. I mean, I think just last week we heard that OpenAI had a data breach, and they're obviously minimizing. There's not enough information out yet, but they're minimizing it. That maybe the training data was used, maybe it wasn't. It was breached, maybe it wasn't. But the fact of the matter is, the more as I mentioned, this is only getting worse before it gets better. With the advent of AI, you see a lot of AI enabled phishing campaigns, which is again, so it just literally they send out several different phishing types of phishing emails, and at this point it's also very difficult to, sometimes it becomes very difficult to detect. So and I'll give you an example. For instance, this is not just an organization, but in government, the state of California, where people get hacked all the time, the state of California has not had a head of cybersecurity for 2 years.
Wow.
So the fact is, people don't think maybe government pays enough, but also, and they had the last person who was there moved to a private consulting firm. So, and there hasn't been, maybe there has been an effort, but there not enough of an aggressive effort to bring somebody in. So the way CISO should really look at the future state is, a partnership between business or whatever, in this case, like the government and the security function. How can security be viewed as a strategic asset or a competitive advantage? Because everyone, all your peers are going to get hacked as well. All your peers are facing the same problem. So if you invest in your security posture, you are going to have that elevated level of confidence from your consumers or your constituents. So that's number one, to like align yourself with the business, show them like how this, the return on investment when it comes to cybersecurity is very hard to measure, right? You don't know how much a data breach that had been prevented would have cost you, and you don't even know how many data breaches you have prevented on an ongoing basis. So because we're always on the defensive, we don't know, and threats are occurring almost continuously. But there is a way of saying, well, we've been paying this much in fines, which could, these, millions of dollars could have been deployed back into the business, where we could have generated, we built new products, penetrated new markets, generated more revenue, and so on and so forth. So there is a way for the CISO to make their case to the sponsors. So it's really important to have a sponsor. It's a business sponsor, an organizational sponsor. So those things are really important, and I think that's number one. Obviously, the other thing is leveraging AI across the board, especially when it comes to regulated entities. There's still a lot of hesitation. How can you actually find those low-hanging fruit? How can you find those use cases where you can get those quick wins, and where you can demonstrate that this is not something to be overly cautious about, but something to explore in a meaningful way. I think that, and then the other thing is there is a skills gap, which people say we talked about it, like around 1 million open jobs, but actually it's not, from what I've seen, it's not a skills gap. It's more of a talent and experience gap. So people who come right out of college don't easily find cybersecurity degrees and cybersecurity degrees do not find jobs as easily. The jobs that are open are like, they need 10 years of experience. I think that, again, CISO should like think about building functions with diverse teams, like people from design. Security by design is really an important concept that should be embraced going forward, especially with the regulation with AI sort of permeating everything. So building diverse teams, and also not looking for years and years of experience, because it really what it does is it leaves a lot of gaps in the organization. You're not going to find somebody with 10 years of experience in something, and you won't fill that role, just like the state of California, and you put yourself at risk. How about hiring some of these people out of college and training them, putting them through the grinder, or not really the grinder, but like giving them some aggressive training and mentorship and experience within the organization, so that they are able to perform to a level that is close enough to what you want. I mean, one thing we have to understand is there is no silver bullet when it comes to cybersecurity. You are constantly being attacked, and the threat actors only have to be lucky once. The targets have to be lucky every time. So it's very important to understand that, and with that, think about, how do you build a team? How do you gain that support from within the organization? And how do you leverage the new technology that's out there? Because again, what I see at large enterprises is, it's usually the GRC and the security teams that are pushing back on these tools, versus saying, okay, let's create a sandbox and let's try to figure out what we can do with this. So I would also ask CISOs to be a little bit more open about like emerging technology and the different things that can be done with that.
Actually, I completely agree. It's like you get more with honey than you do vinegar, and I think sometimes CISOs, back to that kind of question I always ask my guests, is that the one thing they think needs focus or clarity in the industry. And I think a lot of CISOs can be a bit reactive, rather than working with people, understand the business logic, understand the net gain and benefit of an implementation of a new tool or something like ChatGPT or Copilot, whatever it may be. And I think working with the business and scaling with them rather than scaling against them. And it's interesting you mentioned, AI and phishing. The level that these attacks are happening at are almost replicating human behavior. So your defenses won't really detect, or may not detect, that the age old, you get the typical Nigerian scammer. You have 10 million X dollars in an account from your uncle who was here 10 years ago, whatever it may be. That's now changed to the point where it will replicate. Maybe it will send to an employee in your company, replicate their responses, then relay them back and use that as like a cloned entity to then target someone in your organization. Like we've seen it with deep fakes.
Yeah, of course, deep fakes.
That stuff is crazy. And one thing we always have a laugh with in the channel is, we had a segment on the channel where it cut to the deep fake Tom Cruise guy, and he's running for president. And it's like the AI algorithm in YouTube hate me because they say this is election campaign stuff. I'm like, it's not. It's a guy who looks like Tom Cruise, and then you're trying to explain this to people. But again, certain, the algorithm and everything else. But I think you're right, like security being a strategic asset and being used to leverage as a competitive advantage. I think a lot of people struggle with that articulation, and that's why people like yourself are really good to come into an organization and convey that right message. And your earlier point about OpenAI breach, OpenAI, I think, have a prime example of an entity that's scaled at such a ratio, had such investment. The fundamental basics are gone. Like I couldn't even tell you if they have people in their security function. The recent interview with their CTO, like we don't know where the data comes from.
Yeah.
So then if they're having data leakage or they're having issues with data sets, they don't know where they're being acquired. And then, you know, if there's something embedded within those data sets that then open up an attack vector, those are kind of like concerning for people leading AI in the world. But yeah, we will conclude on any kind of final thoughts then, Samrah, in terms of, you know, is there anything, any advice that you'd like to give to our users or anybody watching the episode? Yeah.
No, I mean, I really think that it's, especially when it comes to cybersecurity or AI or even digital transformation. I think at this point, and as I mentioned, like, you know, the digital transformation efforts have been going on for a while. Now you want to incorporate AI into it. Security is kind of an afterthought. So what I would suggest, and what I've, you know, the way I do it, with the organizations I work, is like take a step back, reevaluate all your strategic roadmaps, your, you know, your journey going forward, because you need to have two different strategies. One needs to be tactical, the other needs to be strategic, because you do need to sort of satisfy your customers and your employees when it comes to some of the emerging technology today, because I know that a lot of employees and customers get really frustrated that, you know, on a consumer level, they can use ChatGPT, but how come, you know, their bank portal is like so antiquated? So that you know, you need to like have some tactical strategies in order to sort of allay the concerns of your employees and your consumers. But on a long-term basis, you know, you have to now come to a realization that this transformation is going to be an ongoing process. It's going to continue to evolve. There is no end state, at least not for the foreseeable future. So you have to have somewhat of a future-proof strategy, you know, like platform strategy, and work from there. So I would sincerely suggest just step back and reevaluate, especially if you're working off of plans that were developed maybe a year or two ago, and you've just kind of like put the AI stuff on it and the security part on it. You just really you know, look at it again and develop a much more cohesive, thoughtful, intentional plan around that.
Excellent. And yeah, thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. And thanks again, Samrah, for your time. Really appreciate it. It's been super insightful. And again, it's always good to see a friend again. And yeah, thanks again for your time, Samrah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.